The hand sewing stitch that I'm using to close up the pattern weight at the bottom is called a ladder stitch. Now the ladder stitch is great because it's actually a hidden stitch and you don't see it from the outside. I would recommend using the large pattern weight piece and just cut out your practice sewing piece of fabric like this. And you want to take it and fold it in half. And we're going to do a little finger pressing like so, in half again on both sides. And finger press that. It should look like that. If you're just starting out and you're a beginner at this, I think the best way to practice your ladder stitch by hand is actually sewing a simple line as a guideline on both sides. Where you just folded on both sides of the half, go ahead and just do a simple straight stitch. Let's do that on both sides. It should look something like this with 2 rows of simple stitches. Now I used a stitch length of 2.5, but you can use 3 millimeters or even 4 millimeters just to start when you're practicing. I would take 2 clips just to stabilize both ends while you're practicing. I'm going to be using red thread as a contrast. I wanted to show you the Pincushion too since you asked about it. Yes, these are wrap pins from Helena Garcia's shop. She still has these available. They come in a set of 10. They're much thicker than the normal sewing pins that I use, so I use them more kind of like a push pin or just to hold all of my bobbins when I'm hand sewing in place. And what I love most about it, using it with this Pincushion that I got from newcomers, I have it linked in my Amazon store. They still have black ones available, but they have a whole rainbow of colors, so you can choose which one, and they're all like a velvet material, which is really pretty, and like a nice brooch looking top. What I like is that, see, they don't really fall off easily, so they're nice and secure when you're hand sewing. If you're like me and you love Halloween stuff, then you definitely need these bat pins. And I'm using these bobbins here because they're actually partially empty. I like to use a new bobbin whenever I'm working on a brand new order or if I have a new project that I want to start, and just to make sure that I have a full bobbin that doesn't run out while I'm working on stuff. As I mentioned, I'm going to be using red thread so it's easier to see as a contrast color to show you exactly how to do the ladder stitching. Before we start with practicing, I highly recommend that you get some wax. This is a great way to make sure that your thread doesn't bunch up while you're hand sewing, and I like to use this for a lot of the hand sewing stuff that I do for my own orders and for my own projects. And it's really easy to use. All you have to do is take the thread and just pull it through one of the open slots, and then just pull to make sure that the thread is entirely covered. And now your thread has wax on it, but it's not like caked up. Picture the 2 stitches right here. So these are 2 of the lines that you're trying to combine and sandwich together, but you don't want the stitch to show. So what you do is you enter through one side on the end. Now I go from right to left because I'm a right-handed person, but if you're left-handed, obviously you start from left to right. So I would start from the right on either side, top or bottom, insert the needle here. Directly across is where you insert the needle. So literally it's parallel to where you just started. And then you would push the needle like, 1 or 2 stitches, whatever the distance is when you're practicing. I like to go at about a 2.5 to 3 millimeter stitch length, but while you're practicing, go from like a 3 to a 4 millimeter stitch length, just so it gives you a little more space to practice. So then once your needle comes out, again, you're going to poke it through the opposite side. And now you see why it's called the ladder stitch, because it literally looks like a ladder. So same thing, it's just going to keep going as you work your way down. So just think of it this way, as each side is like an entry or exit for the needle. Start my first stitch on the opposite side. Okay, should look like that. And then I like to kind of loop it through the tail where the knot of the thread is. This way you are anchoring in your very first stitch. And now if you were actually sewing up the pattern weight, you would tuck the thread inside so that it's hidden. And when you're starting, you go directly across from where you started for your next stitch. That's right around here. I'm going to go through 2 stitches and then pull the thread through again. And again, you're going to be putting the needle through directly across from where you were on the opposite side. And so you're really going in between the layers. Just going right across from where your needle just came out from, and then poking it through the opposite side at the same point. So continue to do so. And you're going to want to practice this. It's not going to look perfect right when you start, and that's totally fine. I've actually fixed some of my cat toys this way. You'll notice they have a ladder stitch closure. You kind of see how it's nicely sandwiched together now. And that's how you close up the pattern weight. Now I flew through it in the original video, but now that I've kind of taken a slower approach, I think you can see the details of what it looks like. When you're done, it should look something like this. It's okay if it looks a little bumpy when you're practicing. You'll get better at it, I promise. In my original video, you noticed that the bats were actually going down away from the elastic handle. But if you have a piece of fabric that has like a pattern that's going up in one direction, you can actually make sure that the pattern, when you're cutting it out, goes flipped over. So just keep in mind that if you have a design that's going upwards and you want to make it look like it's going up towards the top where the elastic handle is of the pattern weight, then just flip the pattern upside down. Just think of it this way, wherever the strap placement is, that's the direction that the pattern should be going. Okay, see that? And now if you want to use a guideline so that you can practice your ladder stitching on the actual pattern weight, I would go ahead and add a 1/2 inch stitch right down the end. So basically the way the pattern piece looks, I have the 1/2 inch seam allowance here marked. Go ahead and stitch along the opposite side right here, 1/2 inch. Guideline stitch you just did is going to help you when you get to this step when you're ready to close up the pattern weight. You can use that to make sure that you're stitching it at the correct width, and so it's nice and even and clean when you're done. So the way that I like to start my ladder stitch, and you probably saw it on the video, is I like to go through kind of like one of the last stitches that I had made with the sewing machine. Let me see if this side's a little easier. There we go. Take my needle and kind of use that as a starting point. Loop my thread under. And then when you get close to the knot, you see how there's a little bit of space here? I like to push my needle through. And then that creates like a knot. So it's like an anchor stitch when you're initially starting. Take a pair of tweezers, tuck in the string, the extra tail of the thread, into the actual pattern weight. And now you're already starting with the hidden stitch. That's how I like to start my ladder stitch. I don't know if it's kind of like a common way to do it, but it's just my method. I think it'll work for you too. Ready to start stitching your ladder stitch. So again, you are using the guideline stitch that you made as a good starting point. And this will ensure that your ladder stitch is nice and even. And I like to go through it twice. So I'll go through one side and then go back on the other, just to kind of stitch through any of the gaps that I missed. You want to make sure that you're getting a tight enough stitch, even by hand. Do the best you can with sticking to the guideline. Now we're towards the end. So this is where I kind of go through and I do it again, kind of make sure it's nice and even and flat. Go back towards the opposite direction now. So just repeat the same method that I just showed you. But now you kind of want to go in between the previous stitches that you made. So now when you get to the end, go through kind of like your last stitch, create like a little loop, and then that creates like a nice knot. Do that a few times. You can then take your thread and needle and kind of gently loop under like about a 1/4 inch or so, or 1/2 inch of the stitch, and just kind of tuck in your tail. And I like to do this twice, because in this way you're making sure that everything's nice and hidden. And you want to make sure it's kind of sandwiched in between the layers that you just stitched through. Your needle out towards the end at about the halfway point, and go ahead and snip that. This way you're keeping everything nice and concealed. No openings for the rice to slip out. That's how you close the pattern weight. Hope you found that helpful. Let me know if you have any other questions. Thanks.